What's going on, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets presented by So Rare, live here on Game Plus Network, also live on our FTN Network YouTube page. A friendly reminder, Mean Streets, you can listen on iTunes and Spotify as well. Happy Friday. One more day here as we head into the weekend, and we are inching closer and closer to week one of the NFL season. A little preseason action last night. So week one of the preseason officially underway. We're going to talk about the schedule in a little bit. A couple things we're going to keep our eye on. Few players we're going to have to keep tabs on, and we'll break it all down on Monday. We will go over a couple games from last night. There are two players in particular I want to talk up just a little bit here. And speaking of talking up, we have not one, but two great guests here today on Mean Streets. I'm looking forward to talking to them both. Aaron Schatz, the founder of Football Outsiders, the creator of DVOA, is going to drop by on the show today. He has been making his rounds. We caught him on Good Morning Football earlier in the week. It was a fantastic segment, super fun. And the crew gave him some well-deserved props for predicting the Eagles in winning the NFC. Of course, on the way to the Super Bowl, they did not win the Super Bowl, but they gave him some props. And like I said, it was well-deserved. He gave his Super Bowl predictions. You can go back and watch that if you want. I highly recommend it. It was really, really good. The Good Morning Football crew is fantastic. And Aaron was a great addition to that segment. And I'm really looking forward to my conversation with him today. Of course, the FTN Football Almanac 2023 edition. It is live over at FTNfantasy.com. As you see there, man, I've read it last night. I've read it twice. It's actually fantastic. And it's not a surprise. I've been reading Aaron's stuff for years and years. I love the fact that it is available at FTN. I love that, of course, selfishly, he's going to join me today to talk about it. But in the book, there's 500 plus player projections from a fantasy football standpoint. Of course, you have the cutting edge DVOA metrics that he breaks down, team previews, what to expect this season, rookie projections, prospect rankings, is everything that you can imagine in this book and more. And you will walk away feeling a little bit smarter about the game of football. Honestly, reading it and then reading it a second time, because you miss a couple things. There's a lot of detail there. There's a lot of information. And even if you're not a big fantasy football player, you just love the game of football, this book is for you. And you saw there in the graphic that our guy George made. I mean, a lot of just big names in the industry talking up the book, talking up Aaron and his work. And I mean, you see right there from Bill Simmons, a book that any self-respecting NFL fan needs to purchase. And I totally agree. So looking forward to the conversation with Aaron. I just want to hear, like, what did he learn? Because even myself, not that detailed in my writing. It's a lot of info there. But when I write an article over at FTN Fantasy, or I just dive into something, there's always something that I learn. Maybe there's a player or a team that I didn't think would project as well when you do the research. I'd love to hear from Aaron. Is there a team that surprised him, maybe in a good way, a bad way? Talk about some of the metrics. Of course, he's a big analytic guy, and I'd love to not so much get into running backs with him because, of course, the running back market is a big topic in the NFL, and he'll tell you he's the reason that the running back market is the way it is at the moment. Of course, a lot of analytical talk now in the game of football. So I just want to, this is year 19, I believe, for him. So I'd like to hear his thoughts on how things have changed in the NFL and with his research and with the book as well. So he's going to join us in about 25 minutes or so. First up is Jay Morrison, my former colleague. He's currently covering the Cincinnati Bengals for Pro Football Network. He actually joined Mike Randall yesterday on our FTN Network YouTube page. You can go check that out, previewing the Bengals. We're going to have a little bit of a Bengals discussion as well. The latest on Joe Burrow. What's Jamar's ceiling? What is his ceiling? I think we know what he could hit, but man, since he's entered the league, he's the second most receiving touchdowns in the NFL. Missed some time last year, but was well on way to top what was a brilliant rookie campaign for Jamar Chase. So what's Chase's ceiling? What can we expect from Irv Smith? The latest on Joe Mixon. And also, who's the backup running back to own in Cincinnati? Chase Brown is starting to turn heads. He's got a real opportunity here to be the backup, enter as the backup behind Joe Mixon. And we will go over the Bengals schedule. look at some tough opponents on the schedule. They got another great looking matchup near the end of the season with the Kansas City Chiefs. I believe that would be 3 years in a row they're going to go up against the Chiefs near the end of the season. I think last year was kind of almost at the midway point, but I do remember the barn burner, the shootout before, of course, these two teams have met in the playoffs, and they probably will meet another time in the playoffs. We're going to go over their win total. It's at 10.5. We get some fun little player props for Jay as well. And you can catch Jay and all of his work on the Twitter machine, the X machine, at by Jay Morrison. So really looking forward to the conversation. It's been a minute since I've chopped it up with Jay. As for the preseason, got underway yesterday. Seattle took care of Minnesota 24-13. Ty Chandler deserves to be talked about here today. I watched the game. I saw some highlights. He did a pretty good job. He was 11 for 41 on the ground. He caught 4 passes, all 4 of his targets for another 29 yards, a couple nice cuts and runs. There is an opportunity here between him and Dwayne McBride, who the Vikings drafted this past year, Ty Chandler, a couple years ago. He's on my taxi squad, and I'm really feeling like I may be able to use him this season. And heck, we may even be talking about a committee in a couple weeks. We've talked a lot about, Alexander Mattison and the splits between him and Dalvin Cook, with Cook gone, and the Vikings run offense maybe not being super efficient this year. Maybe they will struggle to run the football. The defense, I believe, still has some holes. We could see Ty Chandler be something here in fantasy football. I've had him ranked ahead of Dwayne McBride, not high, is a late round pick kind of in best ball formats, but we'll keep an eye on this backfield. As for McBride, 0 work in the passing game, 6 for 15. Zach Charbonnet, who was out indefinitely a week ago, was on the field yesterday, 4 carries for 14 yards, and he caught both of his targets for another 14 yards. JSN had 3 grabs on 4 targets for 25 yards. No Geno, no Kirk Cousins, not expected. Jordan Addison caught 1 ball for 22 yards on 3 targets, but Ty Chandler is somebody to keep an eye on. As for the other game, the Texans took care of the New England Patriots, and I know it's just preseason and there's no Mac Jones and no Ramondre Stevenson, but I really do believe it's going to be a long year for the Patriots. Tyquan Thornton caught both of his passes for 31 yards. Zappy was in there, 12 for 14, 79 yards. But the big takeaway was Tank Dell. If you watched the show earlier this week on Game Plus Network, we did a best ball draft, and we talked about the Texans stack. And I said, why would you take Robert Woods when you can take Tank Dell? Right around the same point. There's a higher ceiling, and I get it. It's just the preseason. It's just one game. D'Amico Ryans is talking about how they have big plans for Tank Dell as well. 8 targets, 5 grabs, 65 yards, and a touchdown. The Texans stack has been one of my favorite stacks, late round stack in best ball formats, right? You get CJ Stroud late. I love Nico Collins as a player. I was drinking the Kool-Aid last year. Didn't totally work out, but he had over 30 targets in his last few games last season when Brendan Cooks wasn't on the squad. Again, there's no Cooks. I like Dalton Schultz. He's one of my favorite tight ends to take in drafts as well. Those two guys, they'll probably fight for targets to be the number one option. You got John Mechie, who didn't play football last year. Great story. Back in the field, former 2nd round pick from Bama. And then you have Tank Dell. You have players there inside this offense that have like a appealing upside. Robert Woods, we kind of know what we're going to get with Robert Woods. You can go back and look at his resume and see the 2 years when he was with the Los Angeles Rams. He's not going to have 1,000 yards. Those were big touchdown seasons for him. They were outlier seasons. He was with a really good offense, and Sean McVay's a heck of a play caller. Robert Woods is going to be on the field. Like, they did give him some guaranteed money. He's going to be on the field. He's a great blocker. He's a veteran presence for some of the younger wide receivers in that wide receiver room as well. But I just feel like his ceiling is 550 yards, 4 touchdowns, 50 grabs. Maybe Tank Dell can top that in a few weeks. We're not going to get carried away here. We're not going to move him up to wide receiver 45. But this is somebody we've talked up quite a bit here on Mean Streets. Those 3 wide receivers in Collins, Mechie, and Tank Dell. There is a real opportunity here for targets on a team that, let's be honest, they're going to be playing from behind quite a bit. The AFC is completely loaded. And, I think the defense is slightly underrated, and it will be better with D'Amico Ryans as the head coach here, but they don't really have the personnel in Houston to compete. But CJ Stroud, not super impressive. 4 attempts. One of them was a pick. We did have Mills in there, 9 for 12, 99 yards and a touchdown. No Dameon Pierce. This time last year, he completely balled out. Which rookie wideout will ball out? Maybe it's a running back that will drive up draft boards when we see this week. And there's always one of those guys. You can go all the way back to Amir Abdullah. Let's bring up, George, the week 1 preseason schedule. We'll take a quick look at it, and then we'll round out the show because we have our guy Jay Morrison hanging by as well. So things I'll be looking for here: the Packers offense, new look offense, Jordan Love under center, Jaden Reed, Christian Watson as the alpha number 1. Want to see how that offense looks. I'm sure we're going to see Jordan Love, right? He's not some seasoned vet, even though he was drafted a few years ago in the first round. Now he's the guy. Let's get him in there and see what he has to offer. How many touches is Bijan Robinson going to get? Let's see this new look run offense here in Tampa Bay with the Buccaneers and Rachaad White. I'm going to be taking a look at a lot of the Giants wide receivers. See Jalen Hyatt get in there as well. Cleveland, I don't imagine we'll see much from Deshaun Watson. Nick Chubb won't touch the field, but we're going to keep an eye on Elijah Moore and a new look offense there, which won't be as run heavy in Cleveland. And then the Broncos and the Cardinals in there as well. It's going to be a long, long season for Arizona. We'll touch on some of the other games in a little bit. Jay's in the house. We're going to take a 1-minute break here. We'll send a commercial. And when we come back, we are going to hear from Jay Morrison, former colleague of mine. Really looking forward to chopping it up. We're going to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, a sneaky little backup who potentially is on the rise. I'm seeing him drive up draft boards as well. And we will go over the schedule and have some fun props for Jay as well, because I know he likes to dabble like myself. We'll be back in a couple. Hang tight. You're watching Mean Streets here on Game Plus Network, also live on our FTN Network YouTube page. Chris Meaney here as we bring in Jay Morrison by Jay Morrison on the X machine, the Twitter machine, whatever these kids are calling it these days. Hey, it's been a minute, dude. I've always loved our time together. I'm so thankful you took the time here to jump on. I know you touched base on the Bengals with Mike Randall recently, so I really do appreciate it. Of course, you can follow Jay. He's covering the Bengals, the beat writer for Pro Football Network. Man, welcome. How are you, dude?
I'm great. It's good to see you. It's good to be back with you. It's been a while. You're right. It has been a minute.
Yeah, it has. I always had fun with you and Paul, and listening to you guys go back and forth. Always an entertaining podcast, and covering the Bengals for years. You've been so in tune, and fun combos with Arby's and little side bets that you guys had as well. So really looking forward to this conversation. I appreciate you taking the time here. I want to start with Joe Burrow. I want to start maybe the latest on Joe Burrow. Just returned to practice, of course, suffered the calf injury a few days ago. What's the latest on Joe Burrow? Is there any concern that, Joe won't be ready to go week 1?
I don't know if there's concern, but it's definitely a possibility. Right now, the latest is the original. It's the old news. Zach has not backed off of Zach Taylor, the head coach, has not backed off of that timeline of several weeks. Every time he's asked about it, he says it's several weeks from when I first said it was several weeks. And that was July 27th, the second day of training camp. So it's one of those things. Part of it maybe is playing coy and not trying to give up a competitive advantage, but I think there's some truth to the fact there where you just don't know. These are the kind of injuries that have a high rate of recidivism, and that's the last thing you want for him to come back too early, re-injure it, and then you start that time clock all over again where it's several weeks again, and now you're talking about mid-season. So they're going to get him to a point where he feels like he's 100%, and then maybe go a couple days beyond that. And if that involves missing the opener, then so be it. But as Jamar Chase said, it's far more important for them to have Joe Burrow for the bulk of the season than it is for one game at the start of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, no worries about him getting paid or not being one of the best quarterbacks when he's on the field ready to go. It's been some bad luck for him, though, right? Of course, in year one with the season ending injury and then had his appendix removed, wasn't with the team, last year. And I remember when you mentioned Jamar Chase, remember when Jamar Chase was a rookie and hearing you and Paul Danier Jr. talk about, the football, and people were worried about Jamar Chase dropping passes and he wasn't even catching them from Joe Burrow in camp in his rookie season. And since we're on Chase, like, what's his ceiling? What's Jamar's Chase ceiling look like? Because I don't even know if he's scratched the surface yet. He was well on his way to surpass, shatter some of the numbers that he had in his rookie season, and he did miss some time. Like, what does Jamar Chase's ceiling look like in your opinion?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I you have to remember, as good as he's been, this is still year 3, and these guys they show growth, and he could be a much better receiver in the years to come. I don't know if that's necessarily going to manifest itself in terms of numbers, just because of the weapons they have around and the way Joe Burrow spreads it around. And he's you go back to the early days with Andy Dalton and AJ Green, and it was basically force feed AJ Green at all costs, and that's just never going to be the case with Joe Burrow. He's going to get the ball where it needs to go. I think you're going to see Jamar's numbers continue to be very impressive, and anybody that drafts him will be very happy. But as long as T. Higgins is here, there's only the old adage, there's only one football to go around, and they're both going to get theirs. And maybe one game it's Jamar going off, and then he's going to get the added coverage the next week, and then T's going to have the big game. So I think there's still room for growth for Jamar as a player, but I don't know how much higher the numbers are going to get. He's already putting up terrific numbers.
Yeah, second most receiving touchdowns since he's entered the league. And again, he has missed some time. I mean, the connection between him and Joe Burrow, just absolutely fantastic. What do you make back to Burrow again in the offensive line? A lot has been made, of course, you're well aware of this, of the offensive line over the years and protecting Joe Burrow. And I remember the game against the Titans, he was sacked a few times and they still came away with the W. The defense has improved, I feel like, year in and year out. Have they done enough over the past little bit in the offseason here to bolster the offensive line and protect Joe, in your opinion?
Yeah, they really have. It was actually last year when they went out and signed the 3 new pieces with Alex Kappa and Ted Karras. Then those two, and then you bring in a guy like Cordell Volson last year, and he starts as a guard every game. So now you figure he's going to be that leap from year 1 to year 2 is so much more. And then they sign Orlando Brown Jr. in free agency this year, move Jonah Williams from the left side to the right side. This is the best offensive line they've had probably since that 2015 season when it was anchored by Andrew Whitworth, and they won the division. They were a couple of dumb penalties away from beating Pittsburgh in the wild card game, and who knows how far that would have gone. So yes, this line is better. It's bigger. It's just, I mean, offensive linemen are big anyhow, but this is a really large group, and they found something last year with the gun run, where I think it was week 5, week 6. They basically did away with the outside zone and just said, we're doing nothing but shotgun, and we're going to run downhill out of shotgun. And they really found some success there. It wasn't big explosive numbers, but the efficiency was good. The run game picked up. I think we are going to see a much better run offense this year. And I would assume that the sack and the hit numbers are going to continue to go down. It was just that team really came together last year. The starting offensive line started the first 15 games together, and then that's when disaster struck, and it was week after week. Another guy go down, another guy would go down, and that really hurt him in the postseason. But now all those guys are back and healthy. Alex Kappa is dealing with a little something right now. They are saying it's minor, but I expect all 5 of the starters to be out there week 1, and this to be a much better, much more solid offensive line.
Yeah, and you mentioned Joe Mixon in the run game. Of course, Mixon in the news, a few days ago, facing a civil lawsuit at the moment. But we don't have to dive into that. But he has been a guy not super efficient maybe on the ground, but catching passes into the backfield. We know the work that he's going to get in the goal line. I want to talk to you about Jace Brown. I mean, you just saw the board come up earlier. Those were just underdog ADPs, and you see Mixon going currently RB15 in fantasy football over at underdogfantasy.com. How about Chase Brown as RB61? Seen some highlights of him, Jay, in camp, catching some passes out of the backfield. A real opportunity here to be the potential number 2 guy. Do you feel like he has the edge on Chris Evans? Like, what do you make of Chase Brown when you watch him play?
Yeah, I do think he has the edge on Chris Evans. Chris Evans has never been someone that they've been really comfortable with in pass pro, and you still don't see it as much in camp. And Chase Brown will stick his nose in there, and he's a small guy, so that's where you wonder about how effective he's willing to get in there and be that third down back and pass protect. But how effective is he actually going to be? The other thing is, do they want Travion Williams is dealing with a ankle injury right now? Do they want him to be the third down back? And it's more of a Chase Brown as a sub for Joe Mixon on the first and second downs, where they don't try to just wear Joe Mixon down throughout the year. Joe Mixon's never going to be the third down back. He is a liability in pass pro. So he's not going to be on the field on third down. He's not going to be on the field in 2-minute drills at the end of the game, at the end of the half. So those are big passing times, and whoever is on the field, if it is Chase Brown, then he's going to do that, what you were mentioning with Joe Mixon, catching the passes out of the backfield and get a chance to get some points that way. The big question here too is, you mentioned the court case Joe Mixon has Monday. We'll see how that comes out. I don't think you're going to see any discipline from the team side, but the NFL could always step in and suspend him for a game or two. And then you talk about Chase Brown maybe getting to be the starter the first couple weeks of the season, and who knows, if he goes off, maybe he steals that job from Joe Mixon before he ever has a chance to fight for it.
Oh wow, yeah. You feel like he's NFL ready?
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, tonight will be a big test. I think we're going to see a lot of Chase Brown tonight. He's looked terrific in camp, but all running backs look terrific in camp because nobody's tackling them. Every play's a touchdown seemingly. So he is small. Durability might be a concern, but he has looked explosive. And Frank Pollock, the offensive line coach and the run game coordinator, really had some nice things to say about Chase earlier this week.
It's amazing, Jay. Everybody is unguardable. You can't stop anybody. Everybody is scoring touchdowns. I mean, this
best shape of their life.
Season. I get it. Yeah, best shape of their life. Quad season. I understand. I get it. Everyone's excited, and you do want to hear these things as opposed to not hearing them. I guess that would be a good thing. What else are you looking for tonight?
Yeah, the wide receiver, Andre Yosivas, out of Princeton, freaky athlete, a champion in the heptathlon in the NCAA indoor meet. He has looked terrific in camp. And my initial 53-man projection, I didn't think he would make it. I thought he'd be a guy they would stash on the practice squad this year. And now I've got him making this team. And so I think it's going to be really fun to watch what he can do against, not going against his own teammates and some actual live game reps. And then the other thing there is, if you're going to be the 6th or 7th wide receiver on the team, you got to play special teams. And he looks the part as a gunner on punt coverage, but we're going to see how he performs in some of these other special team aspects that he's asked to play. Miles Murphy, the first-round pick, always going to be interested in those first. And DJ Turner, the cornerback, the second-round pick, has looked fantastic since camp started. Miles Murphy is just now starting to kind of grow into what you expected him to be. So all those rookies tonight will be someone to watch. And then, it may not be the most exciting for some people, especially in the fantasy realm, but punter Brad Robbins, 6th-round pick out of Michigan, has been booming the ball. And this was supposed to be a competition between him and Drew Chrisman. And then Drew Chrisman had a medical emergency on the first day of camp, was rushed to the hospital. He's been back at practice. Everything seems to be fine, but he hasn't got to actually perform in practice yet. So this looks like this is going to be Brad Robbins' job. And he led the NCAA in hang time the last 2 years. And he's not only just been booming punts, he's been pinning guys on the sideline, the returners. So it's going to be fun to watch, as strange as it sounds, the punter kick the ball.
Hey man, you got to have them. It's so important, right? I mean, here,
maybe they go to the Super Bowl last year if they have a better punt at the end of that game against Kansas City.
Yeah, dude, you're not wrong about that. We do have a viewer question here. NBA Rigged is in the house. He says, welcome, Jay. Blessed to hear you from you talking football here. And, since you mentioned, some of the secondary pieces and what you're looking for here tonight, he did say here he was curious watching the defense. He likes watching the defense in Cincinnati. They lost a couple key secondary pieces. How do you see their secondary this year compared to the production from last year, defense in general, Jay?
Yeah, it's hard to say they can be better after losing Von Bell and Jesse Bates, but you're talking about guys, you're replacing them with Nick Scott, a 5-year veteran in the league with a Super Bowl ring, but yet a 1-year starter with the Rams. And then Dax Hill was the first-round pick last year. So those guys could be very good, even maybe just capable safeties, but that connection that Jesse and Vaughn had after playing side by side almost every snap for 3 years. That's going to take a while to kind of build that back. But you take the safety element out of it, you just look at the cornerbacks. They are much better. Eli Apple was starting games last year, and now you're talking about Chidobe Awuzie, who will be back from the ACL. We haven't seen him practice yet, but he's ready to go. And then Cam Taylor-Britt came on last year, took over the starting job midway through the year. He was their second-round pick last year, played great down the stretch. And Mike Hilton, one of the best slot corners in the league. And then, as I mentioned, DJ Turner now is in that fourth corner spot, and he's been just so good in practice that they are really they're going to have a hard time cutting the after they get 4 or 5 corners, picking who they're going to cut, because that is a really, really deep and talented room. So I don't think you worry about that sometimes, because it's you're going to need a 4th corner, maybe a 5th corner at some point in the year. Those guys just don't hold up for a full season. I don't think that's a concern this year because they are so deep there.
Let's talk about them from, an overall NFL standpoint. A little bit of a touch here on the betting market. They are favored to win the division. Of course, you can get all the odds using our free tool over at ftnbets.com. The prop shop, plus 150 at DraftKings, plus 160. Best number I'm seeing. They're plus 550 to win the AFC Super Bowl 11-1, and their win totals at 11-1 or 11.5 here. There are a couple 10.5s juiced to the over at minus 145. Let's look at their schedule here quickly here. Jay, I'm going to put you on the spot. What do you think about this schedule? They open up at Cleveland, so a couple divisional games here. Then their home opener will be against the Ravens. They go and take on the Rams in week 3 in Tennessee. 2 winnable games for sure. Let's actually roll through this. Like week 1, W?
Well, I mean, Joe Burrow hasn't won in Cleveland yet. It's one of those. I don't know. I think they are favored in that game, but I mean, if Joe Burrow can't play, or if he's still, just coming back, and the fact that they, for whatever reason, they struggle in Cleveland, it's tough to chalk that up as a automatic win. But I would lean toward, yes, they probably win that game.
All right, maybe we don't need to go through all the games. I was going to have a fun exercise with you and say week 5 Arizona. What do you think the spread is for that game, Jay? Because we know that they're going to win it.
Yeah, I'd say 7.5, maybe 8. A little more than a touchdown. That feels safe.
When you look at that schedule again, I mean, coming out of the bye, you're going to have a couple tough matchups there at San Fran, and then home to Buffalo before taking on the Texans, and then in Baltimore and Pittsburgh, Jacksonville. So it's a really tough kind of stretch there out of the bye. They have the bye week 7, and they wrap up against Cleveland. And it seems like every year here now, it's just near the end, you have the matchup against KC and Burrow and Mahomes. When you look at this schedule, do you have a slight lean to the over 10.5? Is this a team that you feel like could win 11 games and win this division?
I think they're better than they were last year, but I also think the AFC North is better than it was last year. And
absolutely,
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see all 4 teams in the AFC North finish 3-3 in division games. And so then you're talking about, are there 9 other wins out there? That's hard to do. I would lean toward the under on this. I still think that, I consider them the favorite to win the division, but 11.5 is a big number. And just knowing how competitive this division is going to be. And then, as you mentioned, they've got that late trip to Kansas City on New Year's Eve. And then just still that little uncertainty out there about when Joe Burrow, I mean, there's optimism he'll be ready for the opener, but as I said earlier, there's a possibility he won't. And those first 2 games will be hard to win if he's not available.
Yeah, absolutely. You're going to want to have him. But as Jamar Chase says, you want to have him for that stretch run as well. Not only is the division tough, the AFC is completely tough. I mean, there's a lot of teams with win totals at 10.5. They can't all win 10 and 11 games. So it's going to be pretty tough, very tough road. But I really like this Bengals squad, as you mentioned. We'll have some fun here on the way out. These are some props that I got from DraftKings. Maybe just some rapid fire. I don't need any analysis maybe behind it. Maybe we can pass on Joe Burrow because of the uncertainty. Jamar Chase, look at this prop. 1,275 yards and 10.5 touchdowns. Well, give me a little projection here for Jamar Chase this season. Over, under 1,275 yards.
I'm going to go over on the yards. I'll lean under on the touchdowns. I just think the addition of Irv Smith and some of these other weapons, that there's going to be they're going to be focused on taking that deep ball away, and there's going to be other red zone options if they drive it down the field instead of the explosives.
I did have Irv Smith on my list too. I'm glad you brought him up. Man, he's got some high upside. I'm really looking forward to seeing him with a great quarterback, and hopefully he stays healthy. What about T. Higgins there? That should be 1,000
Yeah,
yards.
you're
And then
missing a
6.5
zero. I would definitely go
He's-
over 100.5.
He may go over week 1.
Yeah. I go over 1,500. I think he's in for a terrific year, regardless of whether he signs or not, but especially if he doesn't get that extension done before the start of the season. And this is a contract year. Yeah, look out. It's going to be a big year for him. Love the Tyler Boyd over as well.
Oh, yeah? Boyd. Hey, Higgins may be the best number 2 in the NFL. And Boyd may be the best number 3, Jay, in the NFL in a squad.
Yeah, I mean that 625 is over 100 less than his previous low. You take out his rookie year. He's just that's a guy that it doesn't matter. You have those two big weapons on the outside. He's going to get his targets and he's going to produce. And I love the over for him.
Appreciate your time, Jay. Why don't you take a minute to tell people where they can find your work?
Yeah, profootballnetwork.com. Multiple stories every day. I've got a preview for tonight's game up already. Follow me on Twitter at @by Morrison. And we have a podcast that we just launched this week. It's called the Pro Football Network Bengals Podcast. It's not a real creative name, but everybody will know exactly what the show's about.
I love it, Jay. Really appreciate this. This is great, right? I mean, You and I have been working together. We worked together for a few years, and you've done so much for me, and I really do appreciate your time, and thank you so much. Enjoy the game tonight, and good luck to Joe and your Bengals this year. We'll say goodbye to Jay Morrison again on the X machine, the Twitter machine. By Jay Morrison. Check him out, Pro Football Network. We're going to take a quick break. After the break, we're going to bring in Mr. Aaron Schatz. We're going to talk about the Almanac, which is available over at FTNFantasy.com. That next here on Mean Streets. Keep her locked. Welcome back in. Mean Streets here live on Game Plus Network. There's the GOAT, Aaron Schatz, A Schatz NFL, joining me. Man, you have made your rounds this week, and I am just honored to have you on this show. I know you've been super busy. Honored to have your almanac at FTNFantasy.com. Of course, you are the founder of Football Outsiders, the creator of DVOA, and I talked about your experience this week on Good Morning Football, and I loved how they gave you the props that you deserved. You talked up the Eagles a year ago. You said they would be NFC champs, and they were NFC champs. And, they were almost undefeated, right? They had pretty much a perfect season despite not winning the Super Bowl. You also gave your Super Bowl prediction. Go back and watch that. It was a fun segment. It was great to hear you talk about your book. And I'd like to talk about this with you today. Of course, it is available over at, there you go, FTNFantasy.com. You got the hard copy available as well, $34.99, 500 plus fantasy football player projections, cutting edge DVOA metrics, team previews, rookie projections, prospect rankings, a whole lot more. Man, it is unbelievable. I've been following your work, Aaron, for quite some time. This is what, book number 19 for you here? Like, congratulations, man.
Yeah, book number 19. I started Football Outsiders in 2003. And the first preseason book we ever did was called Pro Football Prospectus 2005. So this is the 19th book. We have been doing this. I've been doing this for a very long time. Me and Mike Tenier are the only people to have written for every one of the Football Outsiders / FTN Almanac books.
Where does the time go, right? You look up and it's like 19 books here. And I know you're a big analytics guy. And let's just kind of start there. Like, how has How has this book evolved? How has analytics evolved in the game? You've been doing this for quite some time here, and now I feel like almost everybody now, Aaron, is talking about analytics. You hear it, you hear GMs talk about it, you hear coaches talk about it. The Vikings cutting Dalvin Cook, right? Analytical driven, maybe decision there. How is it evolved here now as you head into year 19?
Well, I mean, the book evolved mostly in like 2008 or 2009 when we started doing charting data, right? Because that added a lot of data points we wouldn't have had otherwise about things like offensive line play and cornerback coverage and pressures other than just sacks. So, we're always working on the stats to make the stats more accurate. I have a new version of DVOA to roll out sometime before the season starts. I'm always working on that stuff, but I think the bigger story is how analytics have spread around the NFL. What we did was so niche in the early days. And then what really changed things was when the Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl in 2017, the 2018 Super Bowl from the 2017 season. Because they were seen as so analytically forward, especially in their decision-making on fourth down, but in a lot of the decisions that their front office had made over the previous couple of years. I think that really spread the gospel of analytics around the league. Fans became more accepting of it. Front offices became more accepting of it. You now have a situation where every team has at least one analytics staffer. They have data from the next-gen stats that we never could have even imagined 6 or 7 years ago. It's like a fire hose of data pointed at them, and every team has to hire people in order to somehow accept that, colossal data flow and turn it into something useful. So analytics has come a long way, but mostly in the last 6 or 7 years rather than the first 10 or 12 years that I did this.
Aaron, you're talking to me, right? The Philly special. And they were rotating through all kinds of backs. I mean, you mentioned going for it on fourth down and Doug Peterson being very aggressive, and now other head coaches being very aggressive as well. I mean, like Garrett Blunt, Jay, Corey Clement, they rolled through a bunch of backs, and they're kind of doing that this year as well, right? They let Miles Sanders go, and they got Rashad Penny on a one-year deal, DeAndre Swift on a one-year deal, Kenneth Gainwell on a rookie contract, Boston Scott brought back for cheap. That's a backfield that's $5 million behind arguably the best offensive line in football.
Linebackers,
more
linebackers also, by the way. Philadelphia clearly understands position, the analytics of positional value, because they go cheaper on linebackers and they go cheaper on running backs, and they go more expensive on things like pass rushers.
Right. But the team to beat in the NFC East, in your opinion, are the Dallas Cowboys, correct? You did tell me that on our FTN Sirius XM fantasy show a couple weeks ago.
Yes, we have Dallas with the highest win projection in any of any team in our simulations, slightly ahead of the San Francisco 49ers. I know that really surprises people, but this is a team that's been 12-5 the last 2 years, and not an overperforming 12-5, like a very legitimate 12-5. There's no reason to believe that they're going to be considerably worse than that this year just because they had a bad playoff loss.
Right. Yeah, they've had a couple bad playoff losses over the years. I have some questions about McCarthy, but I do like some of the additions. The defense obviously has some ballers on the squad, bringing in Brendan Cooks, right? I mean, nobody seems to want Brendan Cooks. This guy bounces around all the time, but at the end of the day, he always seems to have 1,000 yards, right? And I thought they needed somebody opposite of CeeDee Lamb. Do you want to just touch on DVOA for a second? I know a lot of people watching the show probably well aware. They've been following your work. They're well aware as well. But for the new people out there that maybe are just stumbling across the show, the book, we have a lot of new faces over at FTN as well. Do you want to just touch on maybe DVOA or maybe a different metric, one of your favorites in the book?
Well, DVOA is the main metric that we use. And here's the simple explanation, is that it measures the success of every play based on the down and distance, and then adjusts it based on situation and opponent. And it's trying to be predictive by filtering out the importance of context. Obviously, there's other stats now that are play-by-play stats that filter out context. But when I got started, everything was all about total yardage. And total yardage is a terrible stat, especially to measure defenses, because if it's 3rd and 10 and you allow 8 yards, you've done a good thing. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So allowing 8 yards on 3rd and 10 should be seen as a success, not as a failure. Yeah.
Right.
And certainly, if you're up by 2 touchdowns late in the game, allowing 8 yards even on a 1st and 10 is a success because you're whittling away the clock. So we try to account for all of those things in DVOA in order to get a more predictive metric.
I've been using it on this show, dude, and giving you credit for years. I think it's the best way to dive into a defense and how good this defense is, how good the offense is. It's all about the opponent, right? I know you talk a lot about the strength of schedule and things like that as well. And, speaking of the Eagles, and last year, a lot of people, the schedule was super easy. This year, much tougher for them. And I'm sure that's part of the reason why you have them behind the Cowboys and behind the 49ers. So doing your research, you've been doing this for a long, long time. When you do your research and you put together this book, is there a player, is there a team that kind of stands out to you that you're like, wow, like I thought that they were good. They're even better than I thought that they would be.
I don't know if that, because I'm usually tracking the players pretty good during the season. There's
Fair.
nothing that ever really surprises me after the season. I think, some of the surprising stats are more about regression and what teams may or may not regress. One is Tua Tagovailoa averaged over 13 yards per completion. And if you look at the last something like 10 or 12 years, there's like 20 or 25 quarterbacks who averaged over 13 yards per completion, and only one of them did it in 2 straight years. And it was Cam Newton, of all people.
Wow.
But it is very rare. And that's why I'm expecting some regression from the Miami offense. It is very rare to average 13 yards per completion in 2 straight years. And then the other stat that I've talked a lot about on a lot of these shows is the Washington and New York Jets defenses were both very good last year, despite being very low in takeaways. Normally, the best defenses are also very high in takeaways. In fact, normally, some of the reason why they're the best defenses is that they are very high in takeaways. But the Jets and Washington were very low in takeaways, and takeaways regress from year to year pretty heavily. So if you expect Washington and the Jets to more likely have an average number of takeaways this year, that will counter some other regression trends that suggest their defenses will be worse, and suggests overall that their defenses are going to be really good again this year. And I think in particular, the Washington over-under number, which is currently 6.5 at most books, sort of underestimates how good their defense can be and is likely to be this year.
I'm really looking forward to them, actually. Sam Howell, you can see what he has to offer. I think they've had 14 different quarterbacks in Washington since they moved on from Kirk Cousins, right? Terry McLaurin has seen a lot of different passes from a lot of different quarterbacks. So maybe they have one here in Sam Howell. Is there another team kind of similar on that thought, with Washington that maybe Vegas or like the NFL community is sleeping on? Like, could that team be the Falcons? Like, what do you expect from Atlanta? They've taken a first round. They've been a skilled player, and again, no disrespect. I know defensive players can be skilled as well, but let's be honest. First round, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, right? Bijan Robinson, the fantasy community is going as RB2. I was in 2 live drafts in New York over the weekend where he went as the second running back, 4th pick off the board. He hasn't even taken a snap yet in the NFL, but are the Falcons one of those teams that maybe they're like a playoff squad?
I'm Mr. Falcons this year. Yeah.
Are you? Okay.
I'm driving the Falcons bandwagon this year.
Go.
And not because of Bijan Robinson, right? Because I'm an analytics guy. I am definitely on team picked too early. Bijan Robinson picked too early. But their defense should be much improved this year with a number of additions, such as Jesse Bates, David Onyemata, Calais Campbell. And their offense, we think, can be a little bit below average because they have such good skill position talent. They have a good offensive line. We do have at least 4 games of track record from Ritter, and he played all right last year. And then their schedule is so easy. And I think people know this about New Orleans, but may not know it about Atlanta. Atlanta and New Orleans have the easiest schedules in the league by far, with a big gap between those 2 teams and the other 30 teams. And therefore, my big pick this year is that even though the NFC South champion had a losing record last year, this year, the NFC South is going to send 2 teams to the playoffs. Atlanta and New Orleans will get into the playoffs over teams that are better than them, but have harder schedules.
Gotcha. All right. Maybe a sneaky little bet on the Falcons to win the division potentially.
Yes, the
in
odds
there
on
as
the
well.
Falcons to win the division, because I think people, the Saints number is 9.5, I believe, and the Falcons is 8.5. People understand that the Saints defense is good,
Sure.
but I think they don't see where we see the projection of the Atlanta defense being improved. And so we see those two teams, most people see it as, okay, the Saints will win the division. We see it as neck and neck. And therefore, Atlanta is a really nice bet.
You know, Aaron, this book sells itself, but I want to give you the opportunity to tell people on the way out here what they are getting when they purchase this, when they read this. What can they expect? I mean, for me personally, I just feel like I am so much smarter, understand the game of football more in tune, ready to go as we head into week one. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's super thick, 450 pages. It's got tons of NFL previews. It's got chapters on all 32 teams, all kinds of advanced stats, FTN data charting stats, fantasy football projections and comments on all the fantasy football players, the most accurate team projections. So, you can get it in either PDF by going to ftnfantasy.com or in hard copy. It's a paperback, but a thick paperback, by going to Amazon. The paperback is a little bit more than the PDF version, but we think it's the best preview out there on the market, and our projections have been great for years. One of the things I tweeted about earlier this week was that I've correctly predicted half of the last 5 years of Super Bowl teams, which is a pretty good run.
Guess so.
Yeah, I had totally forgotten that I had picked a Rams-Patriots Super Bowl in 2018, but yeah, I did. So,
man, how impressive is that? I watched that Super Bowl. I was hoping for a little bit more action, Aaron, but I mean, to nail that.
Yeah, the year I didn't get anybody was the year it was Bengals-Rams, when very, very few people had either the Bengals or the Rams in the Super Bowl.
Well, since you're on it, you've been so hot fire, and I know you gave it on Good Morning Football. I saw you on there. And Mike Tallis in the house. That's some heat, right? I mean, that is unbelievable stuff. Can you share your Super Bowl prediction with us?
Yeah.
Can you do that for the family here on Mean Streets?
I know that Dallas came out a little bit higher in our numbers, but my NFC team is San Francisco, because I do trust Kyle Shanahan a little bit more than Mike McCarthy. When the chips are down and it gets to the playoffs, I'm going to go with Kyle Shanahan. And then in the AFC, my pick is Buffalo. And that's not to diss on Kansas City. Kansas City is a great team, but Buffalo's going to do it one of these years. And they have the highest projected defense. And they better do it this year, because their cap situation is terrible in 2024. This is it. This is the year. This is the last year I'm picking Buffalo.
Yeah.
So they better do it this year.
They better do it this year.
They're going to be in a bad cap situation.
They got some guys who can get after the quarterback this year, too. Von Miller stays healthy. I know last year when he suffered that injury, they just weren't able to get after the quarterback. I think that hurt them. And I believe with Buffalo, I don't know if you think this as well, I feel like they've just been so one-dimensional over the past couple of seasons. So if they can establish a little bit of a run game there, I think they could be well on their way. One final question here for you. I lied, Aaron, because we do have a big fan in the house of yours, and you mentioned Kansas City, and he just says he loves evaluating defenses. How would you evaluate Kansas City's defense during the seasons when they won the Super Bowl? Are they top 10 all season, or they just step up in those big moments?
I think it's more that they stepped up in those big moments. I can load it up now and see where Kansas City's defense was listed for the regular season in those years. They were 14th in the regular season in 2019, and they were 17th in 2022. So they were average defenses in the regular season, and they did step it up when they won the Super Bowl. And we do think their defense will take a little bit of a step back this year. That's one of the reasons why I'm picking Buffalo instead of Kansas City, even though Kansas City is of course, the number one projected offense in the league. But, defense is harder to predict than offense, and history is filled with teams where the defense was not that good in the regular season and then turned it on in the playoffs, and the team went. That was the situation with the Bengals 2 years ago. That was the situation with the Colts in 2006. Like, there's lots of situations where defenses aren't that great in the regular season and then turn it on in the playoffs. So Kansas City could clearly do that again because they have the offense, certainly. All
right. We'll get you out of here on this. Why FTN? I'm sure you love the data that's driven by FTN over the past couple of years. We're just 3 years old here. Why FTN, Aaron?
Yeah, FTN has been very supportive. Kevin Adams was very supportive when I left Football Outsiders about not only getting me charting data, but about hosting the Almanac at FTN. And so that has been a really good relationship. And we'll see where it goes from here. I'm not exactly sure yet where my home is for the regular season yet, but I've been getting a lot of support. FTN's been very supportive. So I'm very happy with that.
Well, we know where the home is for the Almanac, and it is at FTN. One more time, ftnfantasy.com. Hard copy, digital copy, PDF. It is all there for you. Guaranteed, guys and girls. You will love this. Aaron, thank you so much, man. Again, I know you've been super busy, pumping out the book, doing your rounds. Really do appreciate the time here today as well. A Schatz NFL on the Twitter machine. Thank you so much. One more segment here, solo. We'll talk about a couple preseason games I'm looking forward to seeing this weekend. We'll say goodbye right now to Aaron. We'll be back here. Mean Streets continues on Game Plus Network. Keep her locked. I just want to thank Aaron and Jay, both of those guys, for stopping by here today. It's been a fun Friday, right? And thank you guys for the support here on the show. Again, if you're hanging out, smash the like button. You have any comments, any questions, you can reach out at Chris Meaney, meanstreetsftn@gmail.com. Always checking the comment section here on the YouTube machine as well. George, if we could bring up the preseason schedule one more time. I just wanted to dive into this quickly on the way out here. So I mentioned tonight, I'm looking for Jordan Love. I'm looking at the Packers. I want to leave my draft with either Christian Watson or Jaden Reed. And I think that Jaden Reed is going to be a guy that climbs up draft boards here and starting as early as tonight. As for tomorrow, we'll see the Bears. I want to take a look at that backfield. Let's see Rashawn Johnson. I want to see him get on the field, take some snaps, get a couple carries. I know this is going to be a run-heavy football team in the Chicago Bears. They got a lot going on there out of the backfield. Let's see Carolina. Let's see Bryce Young, Jonathan Mingo. Let's keep an eye on those. That little young connection, a new connection. There's a lot of different pieces in Carolina this year. Adam Thielen is on the squad. DJ Chark is on the squad. Hayden Hurst, right? I don't think we'll see anything from Miles Sanders here. Whoa, I'm just like zoomed in, and you take me out. I was like, whoa. Yeah, they get me back on there. I love it. Chargers and Rams, right? Puka Nacua. Let's see what they got there. You know what? For the Rams, these guys in either Van Jefferson, Jordan Love season. Yeah, absolutely. PTP shots. Absolutely as well. The Rams, like, Cooper Kupp is not completely healthy right now. When Cooper Kupp went down, there wasn't somebody really in the wide receiver room that stepped up. But Van Jefferson or Nacua, these are guys that need to be on your radar. They just have to be because if Cooper Kupp suffers another injury, like, somebody has to step up here. And those guys are super, super cheap. One more time, bring that up for me. So I'm not I can't remember, Dredge. I can't remember everything here. And then the Chiefs and the Saints, we're not, I don't think we're going to get a look at Carr and Chris Olave, Michael Thomas. They want to keep these guys fairly healthy, but we may get a look at Kendre Miller here. And then the Raiders, I'm almost certain we'll get a look at Zamir White, and I think he's worth your time as well. We're going to get out of here on that. Appreciate you guys. Have a fantastic weekend. No FTN Fantasy show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio tomorrow. We will return next Saturday at 9 a.m. Eastern. Thanks, guys, for taking the time to hang out. Enjoy the football. We'll chat to you on Monday. Cheers.